bottom line is that our city charter does allow us the authority by ordinance to create a forecast council, to create this new office, and to have it be a shared responsibility between the executive and the council.
You're hearing there the words of Seattle City Council President Lorena Gonzalez talking about a new independent office of economic and revenue forecast. A lot more to that story than you might think. We're going to take a deep dive on that. We're going to talk about what the courts are saying about King County's inquest process and how that affects several local police shooting cases. And we're also going to talk about some big money coming into our election process. A lot ahead here on Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. Brian Callanan here with you. I'm a host on Seattle Channel. The views expressed here are my own. And I'm once again with co-host Kevin Schofield of Seattle City Council Insight. Kevin, the weather is hot, but you have found a way to stay cool. I want to know what's your secret, other than having ice water running in your veins as an independent journalist.
Oh, that's harsh. Oh, man.
I meant that in the
iced tea.
nicest way.
Iced tea. I've always
Iced
got
tea.
a jug of iced tea.
I have some right. I have some right nearby me too, and we'll talk about that in a second. Thanks to City Grind Espresso, our background noise sponsor for the audio podcast. Please do support them. We're hoping to see them back open in Seattle City Hall very soon. Thanks also to our patrons for supporting our show. We're hoping to have more of you join us in this adventure in local independent journalism. If you can help us on Patreon at the $10 level, well, you can put some iced tea yourself in one of these handy 11-ounce Seattle News, Views, and Brews mugs. Now, our patrons love them, as evidenced by our mugshot of the week from Sergey, who says, even my pills are tastier with my favorite mug. Sergey, thank you for sending that in. Please do be responsible in taking your medication. Thank you for taking your medication. How about that? Folks, if you want to keep things going with your weekly dose of local news and analysis, please do support us here.
I hope he's not implying that you and I are a couple real pills.
Well played. I hope not either. But we thank him for the support and thank him for the photo too. Thanks also to Converge Media. Converge airs the video version of our podcast on their YouTube channel Wednesday nights at 7. All right, let's get you up to date with right here, right now. Well, here we are in the penultimate week of July. Plenty going on. The Seattle City Council passing ordinance on a heating oil tax, extending the benefit of the multifamily tax exemption, breaking down exactly where Jumpstart payroll tax money goes, that tax on big businesses. But Kevin, I do want to focus on a measure Council President Gonzalez is sponsoring when it comes to public records. A lot of headlines around this as two whistleblowers brought up concerns over Mayor Durkin's lost text messages from last summer, also some text messages lost from the police chief and the fire chief as well. They're filing lawsuits against the city. So I'm looking at this, Kevin. Gonzalez and City Attorney Pete Holmes are saying this new ordinance from the city will, quote, build confidence in the transparency and accountability of Seattle's elected officials and ultimately strengthen public trust in city government. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I do in this case. So, what's happening with this particular bill is that city employees are either part of the civil service system or they're what are called at-will employees, meaning that an elected official can hire them and fire them at will.
Right.
And some of the public records officers who handle sort of the front line of public records requests have been at-will employees, and this bill just switches them over to the civil service. So that should give them a little bit more protection from sort of political interference in how they handle public records requests. It's a pretty simple thing. It should help a little bit. I mean, it's not going to be, groundbreaking in terms of changing the way our public documents requests, get handled. But it's a good thing to do. Yeah.
It's a start. And I know you brought up some concerns about how the city overall deals with its public record requests. So that question is still out there. And I do want to talk about this when we talk about what's going on with the mayor's office and these texts. What do you make of the, this is an investigation. The Seattle Times has filed they filed a lawsuit against the city, whatever else. Yeah. And now the city's making this counterclaim that the city did not break the state public records law here. What do you think about that piece of it?
Yeah, well, they're certainly within their right to make a counterclaim like that.
City is,
and city of Seattle. I think they're wrong. I think, it's kind of a bold and aggressive approach for them to kind of push back really hard on this, especially when the mayor and some other folks have said, yeah, we made some mistakes.
Yeah, we fell
already.
short. I've heard that phrase a few times. Yeah.
They fell short. They're, carefully worded statements that the lawyers have vetted thoroughly. And now what they're asking is, for a proactive declaration by the court that they didn't break any laws. And I don't know if they'll get that or not. In fact, my guess is they probably won't get that from the court. So they're litigating very hard on this to try to push back. And they're not countersuing. They're not making any allegations against the reporters, making any accusations against Seattle Times. They're just saying, not only to deny these specific claims, but we want the court to say, we broke no laws.
Right. There's a lot ahead with this one. So thank you for breaking down those pieces. A lot still ahead in many different ways on that issue. But I do want to talk about this week, the council also talking about a plan submitted by the mayor about where she wants to spend $30 million on BIPOC communities, as set up in the Equitable Communities Initiative by Mayor Durkin. Looking at what the mayor is presenting here first, before we get into some of the backstory here, Kevin, it appears what the mayor is asking for is a little bit more money into housing with the 4 pillars she was working with here, which includes housing as well as small business help, education, and health. Who's going to get this money? Your thoughts about this?
Yeah, so at the beginning of June, the Equitable Communities Initiative Task Force that the mayor had appointed, which is largely leaders from the Black community in Seattle, made a set of recommendations across these 4 pillars. Out of the $30 million, they said roughly $7.5 million each. And then they've spent the last month and a half going through with a bunch of city departments trying to figure out, okay, like what are the specific, let's get down to brass tacks. What are the specific programs that we want to fund around this? Yeah. And they came up with a list of about 16 that, still go across these 4 pillars, but it didn't quite come out evenly. 2 of them are $7.5 million. One is a little over 8. One's about $6.5 million.
Yeah.
So and that's just kind of the way they fill out. But according to the mayor's office, the task force members were in the loop all the way and having these conversations. And so it's going to take about 7 or 8 different city departments to manage getting all this money out. Mostly they say it's going to be RFPs. There are a couple places where they said there are programs in place already that they might be able to just leverage and add some more money into rather than doing a whole separate RFP.
Yeah. And can I jump in there? Because in terms of who actually gets the money, I know there was some concern about some of these smaller BIPOC organizations hopefully getting in on this rather than some of the larger nonprofits out there. Let me know about that, because I think the mayor is trying to be equitable with this. And there's a lot of organizations out there that might be asking questions.
Yeah, larger nonprofits tend to have, a grant officer or somebody who
that can work on this stuff.
In writing grant proposals to get money. Right. Small organizations almost never have those. They just simply can't afford to do that. So it puts small organizations at a real disadvantage, and just organizations that are running on a shoestring budget at a disadvantage to get more money. The organizations that are larger and have more money have an easier time getting more money. The ones that are smaller and don't have it have a harder time getting it. Right. So
makes sense. Yeah.
It kind of just bifurcates that way.
Yeah.
So the city, the mayor's office has been trying to put together a way to run RFPs that don't disadvantage these small organizations. And they kind of dancing around. I tried to push them on this, around whether they're actually prioritizing small organizations for this, and they wouldn't quite go there.
Yeah, right.
But they're definitely trying. They said that large organizations are still encouraged to apply.
Yep.
But they're trying to, at the very least, change the way the process works so that it doesn't require all this overhead. It doesn't require, knowing how to write a grant proposal with all the right words, the right structure and all this stuff, so that the ones that already have grants, it's an easy layout for them and it's hard for everybody else.
A simplified, low barrier request for proposal was the phrase that I saw out of here too. I think a big push to this is to get the money out there to different groups.
Yeah, and they wouldn't tell me exactly what that means.
Okay, right.
I think they're still kind of working out what that means.
Yeah, but, a lot of hyphens in there for sure.
But the intent is, let's not disadvantage small organizations.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the backstory here, because the mayor this week, essentially with this measure, is asking the council to lift its proviso on these funds, which will get the money out and spent hopefully this calendar year, as the mayor's looking like this. I just think of all the power struggles between the mayor and council when it comes to BIPOC communities, where to spend money. The council had this attempt, or still has this attempt, I guess, to invest its own $30 million. There's a big mess there with the Black Brilliance report happening. So it looks like the mayor's plan might go through, but I'm just trying to figure out what the council wants to do here, because I think there's a certain admittance, well, shoot, our process didn't work, but the mayor's did here. I wonder what happens next with this.
Yeah, so we had this Black Brilliance research project that the council funded and managed the project itself, with the intent of getting a set of recommendations on how to run participatory budgeting.
Yeah.
Now, although the council realized that they can't run the participatory budgeting process themselves, they had to go back to the mayor's office and the executive branch to go figure out, okay, like, how do we actually go execute on this?
Yeah,
and that delayed everything. Well, first of all, the recommendations they got weren't workable. Really at all. And then they, had to go through a couple months process, frustrating process, I think, for everybody, between the legislative and executive branches, just trying to figure out, like, okay, how do we run participatory budgeting? And now it's kind of creeping forward with the Office of Civil Rights kind of at the helm for this.
In charge of it,
And it looks like it's probably going to be the end of 2022 before any money actually gets out the door. So that's been slow and frustrating. And in the meantime, the mayor from day one said, like, okay, I'm going to have a task force. They're going to, they're going to meet. They've got, over a dozen times, right? Over the course of several months, came up with a set of recommendations, and the mayor's hoping to get out money, before the end of this year. So probably a year ahead of the participatory budgeting process.
Critics said it was a little bit more of a top-down process, but please keep going.
So, in the 2021 budget, the city council put a proviso on the $30 million for the mayor's task force and equitable communities initiative, saying, you got to come back to us to release the money before you can go actually spend any money. And we're expecting it to be aligned with the recommendations that come out of the participatory budgeting process. And so this Tuesday, that request to lift the proviso goes in front of Councilmember Mosqueda's Finance and Housing Committee. And they will probably be asking questions about, first of all, do they like the plan that the task force came up with? And second of all, does it align with the priorities that came out of the participatory budgeting process? And we'll see how hard a line they take on that.
I was going to say, pushing back on the mayor is one thing, but it is an election year. They're trying to keep people happy too. I know there are a lot of people in the BIPOC community who want to see this money spent.
And if they stall this out, there's probably going to be a lot of pushback.
Wow. That's gonna be something very interesting to watch there. Up next, we're gonna take a deep dive into the council's plan for an independent office of economic and revenue forecast. That's next on Now Hear This. All right, let's check this out here. The council this week is looking to establish an office of economic and revenue forecast. Kevin, before we jump into a soundbite from Council President Gonzalez about this and the legal concerns that surround this too, why? Why does the council want to do this?
So just a little bit of background on this. The budget process under state law requires making estimates of revenues for the next year, right? It used to be a while back that sort of tax revenues and other things were based on the previous 12 months, right? And there were some changes made that allowed cities like Seattle to actually estimate what their tax revenues are going to be for the next year going forward based upon economic forecasts and things like that. So looking at federal and state economic forecasts and making the best guesses as to what's going to happen. And both King County and the state of Washington have independent economic and revenue forecast office. So they're not run by the executive branch. They're not run by the legislative branch. They're kind of this independent. And, it's a pretty good model that works for them. In the city government, the economic and revenue forecasts are done by the finance director and in combination with the city budget office. And they report out 3 times a year. Actually, under the law, they're supposed to do it at least twice a year, and they do it 3 times a year. They do it in April to kind of give early first quarter, or I guess early second quarter. Here's how the year is doing so far for revenues. Once that's kind of built into the mayor's budget proposal for the following year every September. And then right at the beginning of November as a kind of a last minute revenue update to tweak the council's budget just before they
approve
finalize it, right? To say like, okay, no, really, here's our best idea of how much money
we're
going to spend next year on revenue.
Right.
So, and that process has actually gone very well for many years. It's been very accurate. So just this past April, you know, they made a recommendation last November and said, here's what we think the revenues are going to be for 2021. Which is a crazy time to do it, right? We're in the middle of the pandemic.
Of course.
And then in April, this past April, they gave an update and they were within
they were really close.
1.3%. They were really close.
Bang up job.
And larger context on that. Back in November, they had said, okay, we're going to give sort of 3 versions of this. The optimistic version, the pessimistic version, and sort of the baseline. And our recommendation is go with the pessimistic version. And that's what they built in the budget. And it was almost exactly right. So, but the political side of this is,
the council wants some more control here.
Well, the council in particular right now, this council is pushing for, you know, tax revenues. Right?
Yes, of course.
And the higher the forecast tax revenues, the more money they get to spend in the budget. Right. So there's a little bit of political tension there, particularly when the mayor isn't so excited about these tax revenues and the city council is very excited about them. Like, okay, so do we go with the pessimistic version of those revenue forecasts, or do we go with a more optimistic version? And there seems to be some disagreement over this, and they're not. Neither side is really sort of coming forward with like, "Hey, here's exactly what the disagreement with." But, you know, the city council seems to have wanted to have you know, more money to spend and higher revenue. They kind of want more say over this process. So that's all context to this proposal, which is very closely matched on the King County version. To say, let's have an independent office.
And let me break this down because I want to bring in this soundbite from Council President Gonzalez. She said this last week, and what was really a response, Kevin, to something I think you've been writing about in Seattle City Council Insight for a while, about establishing this new city office without involving an amendment to the city charter. Council President Gonzalez says she's talked to the city attorney about this. She says the council and mayor both have the power to establish new departments. Let's listen.
In our case, the mayor and city council share legislative power under Seattle's charter, and that is found in City Charter Article 4, Section 1. In addition, within the charter, we see that our charter allows the legislative authority of the city, which again includes city council and the mayor by definition in our charter, to create departments unless the charter says we cannot do so in particular areas.
So Kevin, let's break this down here. Gonzalez is saying new city departments do not all have to be under the mayor's supervision, the executive branch there. But your analysis of the charter really clashes with that. I want to break this down as best we can.
Yeah, Gonzalez is wrong.
Okay.
It's just flat out, Gonzalez is wrong on this. So the city charter gives the legislative branch, which at some level is shared between the mayor and the city council, because the mayor has veto power, the power to create new departments. But the city charter also says that all new departments have to report to the mayor, unless the city charter says otherwise.
Says differently.
And there's 2 departments that report to the legislative branch. They're both specifically called out in the city charter right now: the city auditor and the city clerk. And the city charter says both of them report to the legislative branch. There are a couple of independent ones that are listed in the city charter, but you know, even things like the staff for the Community Police Commission, that actually technically reports to the mayor, and you know, and this isn't just like an arbitrary rule. This is actually sort of comes back to the heart of why we have a city charter, right? The city charter is the people saying, here are circumscribed the powers of the legislative branch. Here are the powers of the executive branch. And neither side can go grab more power without the people saying that's okay. So either side or both of them together could propose a new charter amendment that changes, you know, who's got what powers or creates new powers. But neither one of them could go grab a city department and move it under each other. Even together, the 2 of them, if they want to do some horse trading, they can't do that. across these kind of boundaries
Yeah.
without doing a charter amendment that gives the people the opportunity to vote on it and say yes or no.
Yeah, and that's that's the heart of the issue here. That's why it's a big deal. And I think you were looking at this too, that this could potentially set a precedent in some way for how this power struggle kind of plays out between the mayor and the council.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right. We know once this precedent is set of a department that was created and, and under the proposal, which matches the King County one.
Yes.
It creates this new department, the Office of Economic and Revenue Forecast.
Yes.
Which is run by what they call the forecast committee.
Okay.
Which is the 4 people, the council president, the council finance chair, who is Mosqueda at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
The mayor and the director of finance.
I see.
Right.
Okay.
And so 2 executive branch, 2 legislative branch.
Yeah. Okay.
And, they have to have a 3-person majority to make any decision, but they hire the director of this department.
Yeah.
They fire the director of this department and they officially approve a revenue forecast.
Wow.
Right. So, and Gonzalez has argued that because the city charter already says that the 2 departments share legislative power, they can do this, but no, they really can't. So will they try to push this? This is on the agenda for Monday afternoon, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to vote on this.
Yeah.
Will they push it through anyway? I think there's probably a good chance they will. And there's interesting legal arguments about who actually has standing to challenge anything like this in court.
Right. And who would do that?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. So they may just push it through anyway. Because right now, I think I'm not sure anybody else in the city council wants to challenge Gonzalez and Mosqueda on this.
That's a big point here. And I guess just to wrap up this conversation, why not go through with the charter amendment process? The council has done that before with different issues. King County ended up using that process or whatever else. Why didn't the city council do this in this case?
I have no idea. I really don't understand. Why they're doing this by fiat instead, right? Because they, at this point, they could still have, with very little more work than what they've done already, they could have gotten it on the November ballot.
Right.
I think, my guess is they wanted to get it done to try to probably in time for this fall's budget process.
Yeah, right.
They didn't want to wait another year to do it. That's probably the best reason I can think of for doing it. But it's kind of a dangerous year for Gonzalez to push through something that really goes against the will of the people. Yeah. Right. To say, we're even though the city charter says that the people get to vote on this thing. Right. We're not going to give them the chance to do that. Right. It seems like a pretty dangerous thing to do.
Well, I know it's going to have a lot of political ramifications there, but I wanted to make sure I touched on some big news before we move to our final segment here. News from the Supreme Court about inquests in King County. Kevin, I want to talk about this. What did the court rule on last week? And also, what does this mean for some of the inquests into police shootings in our area? Let's start with the ruling there, please. What did the court say here?
Yeah, so the court ruled on an executive order by King County Executive Dow Constantine that he actually made originally in 2018 and made 2 updates to it after that. And it relates to how inquests are run. He had actually stayed the process put on hold the process for inquests in the county, including for Charlene Lyles, Demarius Butts, Isaiah Olay, to kind of work after he got some complaints from families and from other stakeholders that there are some issues with the process that the city was using. Okay. And some of the things he said in his executive order were that as he was trying to sort of give everybody something and make everybody a little happy with this process. Yeah. And in the end, you try to make everybody happy. You made nobody happy with this. Yeah, he tried to say that he could open up inquests to the public to increase transparency. He said that police officers couldn't be subpoenaed, so they could testify willingly, but they couldn't be forced to testify. Yeah, right. And if police officers testify, they can't testify as to their mental state at the time of the incident, because what he said, what Dow Constantine said in an interview last year with Converge, was that what was often happening was police officers would go in and they would say, well, I was fearing for my life at the time, and they'd largely get off the hook. Sure. Right. For doing this, at least in the court of public opinion.
Yeah,
on
right.
this.
Mm-hmm.
So he, his executive order said that police can't testify to the mental state. Right?
Got it. Okay.
So this executive order got challenged by everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody sued. The families sued.
Yeah.
City of Seattle originally sued, though they later pulled out because of political pressure. But a number of other cities in King County have sued.
Yes, right.
The police officers have sued, like everybody sued.
Yeah,
around
right.
this, right? And so it went all the way. It all got consolidated. It went up to the Supreme Court, and they last week issued sort of an order clarifying all this stuff.
Yeah.
And they said, yeah, you can open it up to the public. Absolutely. They said, quoting state law that had never really kind of been asserted this strongly. The state law, which is the one that really sets up the inquest process, says that an inquest must essentially subpoena and hear from every person who has knowledge of the facts, right? And they said that includes police officers.
Yeah,
right? There's no exceptions for anybody.
Right.
They get to hear from everybody, and they get to hear all the facts. So police officers, yeah, absolutely, they can, and almost certainly have to be subpoenaed, right?
Yeah.
Because they clearly have, the ones who killed somebody, absolutely have facts.
Absolutely,
knowledge
of
the facts, right? Can they be prevented from testifying in their mental state? No.
Okay.
No, they cannot. Right.
Right.
The inquest jury gets to hear all of that evidence. Right. So, the families won some things, the police officers won some things, the public won some things and getting greater transparency. And there were, a number of other portions of it, but those were kind of the, some of the bigger pieces in this.
Right. And importantly, just to quickly wrap up here, it allows these different cases you were talking about, Lyles, Butts, Obate, it allows them to move forward a little bit further.
Yeah.
Here.
So there was a question about, since under state law, an inquest has to happen within 18 months of investigation starting. There was a question about whether that had timed out for them because we're now in 2021.
Yeah,
and the Supreme Court kind of looked through the whole procedural and said, no, they can actually go ahead.
Good.
So we're going to get an inquest for Charlene Lyles and for Demarius Butts and for Isaiah Obey. So anybody who's more interested in this can go watch the special report that Omari Salisbury and I did on Converge last week that kind of went through all the details of this.
Great point there, Kevin. Thanks very much for that. Okay, we're going to talk about some big money flowing into city elections, yet again, on its way to a record amount of spending. That's in our final segment here. What's next? All right, so Kevin, we're all getting our ballots in the mail for the primary election on August 3rd. Please make sure you vote, everybody. And you may be getting some mail provided by political action committees involved in these races. Kevin, the two big ones I'm looking at right now, one supporting Bruce Harrell for Seattle's future. A lot of business money there. It's raised more than $278,000 in support of him as we're recording this show. Then you've got Essential Workers for Lorena. Big labor money there. It has raised more than $450,000 to support Lorena Gonzalez. It looks like we are on another record pace of spending in the mayor's race here specifically. What does that say to you?
Well, it says a lot of things to me. So I got the kind of the rundown right in front of me here of this, right? The fact that we're still in the primary and we've got $450,000 for Lorena Gonzalez, who, by the way, is the candidate who as council president tried to push through legislation not only to limit PACs, but specifically to exempt unions from PAC limitations, right? And now she's got $450,000 of money directly from unions in this PAC. To your point, the Bruce Harrell money is, it's kind of hard. You have to spend a little time looking through it to kind of figure out what's going on there, because it's actually all money from individuals, not from companies and not from like the Chamber of Commerce or Downtown Seattle Association. But at the same time, a bunch of them are CEOs or chief executives of companies, right? So trying to make your own decision about, is this business money? Is this individuals' money? But those individuals are related, it takes a little bit more effort to kind of work out what you believe in, kind of the interpretation, what your interpretation is of that money. But $250,000, sitting there for Bruce Harrell. At this point, the polls are saying it looks like Bruce Harrell is going to go through to the general election,
and Gonzalez most likely.
Lorena, it's closer, right? There are 3 or 4 candidates that are sort of tight. And it's kind of interesting that, we would certainly see this level of money in the general election.
Right. But even before
the
that,
fact that they're willing to spend this much money in the primary is a little frightening. And I'm really worried about what it's going to mean for the amount of money that's going to get spent in the general election if they're willing to spend this much money now.
Yeah, no, great point made there. And these independent PACs, they don't coordinate with the candidates. Important to point out that, but it's also, they can basically spend unlimited amounts of money here. So we're talking about something that's going to increase as the months go on here. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that. But Kevin, let's try to push that kind of crazy or sour taste out of our mouths if we can, and move on to the most important part of the show for certain, a taste of the treats you can have on your coffee break here. Kevin, I'm featuring this week, my daughter has baked up the Toll House cookie here with chunks of mini Oreos in there. So she really takes it next level because she knows her dad has a terrible sweet tooth. That whole concept of Toll House versus individual cookie there, this is kind of like the bigger sheet versus that individual there. Do you bake those differently? How do you approach that?
It depends. It depends how thick it is, right?
Okay.
You've got to let the heat permeate through all of it, right? If you're cooking something thick and it's in the middle of a big sheet, you have to worry about is the parts around the edge of the pan going to cook faster than the stuff in the middle? You can end up with like uncooked cookie dough in the middle.
Nobody wants. I like that. But
there's an awful lot of people that are into the uncooked cookie dough, right? While it gets burnt around the edge.
Right.
So like when you have individual cookies, it's a little easier to do that. And you can manage a little bit by rotating the pan, remembering to rotate the pan while you're cooking it. But you still, the stuff in the middle, right in the center of this, that sheet is a little tougher to manage. And again, the thicker it is, the more you have to worry about that as well.
Indeed. This is more on the biscuit level here. And normally there's the part of the show where I just go, and listen to Kevin, but I actually finished the bite this time. I know, it's good stuff. Well, thank you, Kevin. As always, I appreciate your insights on all these things. Thanks to all of our patrons too. Please do support us on Patreon. We're hoping to get your support at the $10 level, so we can send you one of these great mugs here. Great for washing down cookies, by the way. Want to pass that on. Yes, thank you indeed. Thanks for keeping our show going, and a big thanks to everybody out there listening to Seattle News, Views, and Brews, where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. Please do subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you might listen. Again, please do become a patron on Patreon if you like what you're hearing. Thanks also for watching on Converge Media 2. We'll see you next time. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2021.